One of the best aspects in Monster Hunter is the sheer variety of ways to play the game. This is all thanks to the variety of weapons and the sheer amount of builds or sets that you can create. So, I'm Darcblade with a Anti-Alatreon build for the longsword in Monster Hunter World Iceborne. Now the main purpose of an anti-build is to create a set that is made to counter a specific monster in the game. In this episode we're going to be looking at countering Alatreon, providing hunters with two builds to take on the blazing black dragon, one safe, one risky. The longsword does have a unique advantage when compared to other weapons out there thanks to its ability to pretty much counter every single move the monster can use. So first of all is the risky build. This is a high elemental DPS build making use of a ton of offensive skills combined with the Safi Jiva armor set. So unfortunately hunters will have to contend with a health drain, which makes it a little bit risky. Anyway, for this build you'll need the Safi Crested Crown Beta, the Crested Chest Beta, Van Braces Beta, Belt Beta and Boots Beta. I'm also using a Blaze Charm 5 and for my weapon I'm using the Kiar Sword Fire. This has a health regen augmentation and an elemental up augmentation. When it comes to the custom mods, I've gone for increasing the weapon's elemental rating. Now of course you can use a different weapon with a different element, namely a Kiar weapon is preferable, but if you do so, remember to change the Blaze Charm to match whatever new element you are using. Anyway, as for the specialist tools, these are down to personal preference. Now when it comes to the jaws, you've got a few to play around with here, and you even have space for some optional jaws in all honesty. So first of all, I've gone for Expert jaws for the critical eye skill, I've then gone for Resistor jaws to max out the blight resistance skill, I've then gone for a Blaze jaw to max out the fire attack skill. You would replace this Blaze jaw to match whatever element you are using if you are using a different element. I've then gone for Vitality jaws for some health boost, a Sharp jaw for protective polish, and then you'll have some jaws to play around with, to which I've gone for Evasion jaws and Sheath jaws. As for the jaws and the mantles, I've gone for Destroyer, Protection and Attack jaws. So if you've done what I've done here, you should have a build with 150 health, 100 stamina, which will be 200 health and 150 stamina when you're on a hunt and taking all your relevant consumables. You have an attack of 974 with a huge chunk of white sharpness. You have 100% base affinity when True Dragon Vein Awakening is active. And you'll have a fire rating of 1040. Again, this is taken into account with True Dragon Vein Awakening in effect. Anyway, as for the defenses, you have a decent defense of 1081 that is strong against every element except for dragon. So when it comes to the skills, you've got a lot maxed out here. First of all is Critical Eye at level 7. Critical Eye increases the base affinity of a build. You have Fire Attack at level 6, increasing the fire rating and damage of this build. Of course, if you were using a different element, this would be replaced to match whatever new element you were using. So say you were using an ice weapon, it would be Ice Attack level 6 instead. Anyway, you have Evade Window level 5. This is a byproduct of the armor and optional jewels, greatly increasing our invulnerability when we perform evades and dodges. In all honesty, you could pretty much drop this if you wanted to, if you were confident with your counter attack abilities with the longsword. But anyway, you have Health Boost at level 3. Health Boost is a skill that increases our health to that maximum of 200. You have Blight Resistance level 3, negating all elemental blights, which is definitely useful for any build taking on Alatreon. You have Crit Boost level 3. Crit Boost is a skill that increases our raw attack damage when we crit a monster, but it does nothing for the elemental portion of an attack. You also have Quick Sheath level 3, which is a kind of quality of life skill for the longsword. It's not essential, to be honest. It basically allows us to sheath our weapon very quickly, and this does apply to the special sheath as well for the longsword. Anyway, you have Protective Polish level 1, which is a result of the Sharp jaw. Protective Polish is a skill that allows us to put a protective coating over our sharpness gauge, preventing any sharpness loss for a small duration of time after we sharpen our weapon. And you also have Critical Element level 1. Critical Element increases the damage of the elemental portion of our attack when we crit a monster. But finally, for the skills on our mantles, we'll have 3 of them. First is Attack Boost, which increases the raw attack of a build. You'll also have Part Breaker level 2, allowing us to break monster body parts more easily, so definitely wear the Glider Mantle when we're aiming to break Alatreon's horns. And then finally you'll have Divine Blessing level 2, giving us a small chance at taking reduced damage when we take a hit from a monster. Finally you'll have the set bonus, Safi Jiva Seal, True Dragon Vein Awakening. This is a buff that becomes active whenever you have your weapon drawn. It increases our affinity by 40%, as well as granting us an additional 150 elemental rating and 120 element rating if we were using an element weapon. But in return, it drains our health with each slash of our sword, regardless of if we hit a monster or not. So basically it drains our health when using this armor set. However, should you hit a monster enough times constantly, a heal will be activated, recovering the health that was drained. So long as you're not getting hit, the health drain isn't too much of an issue, as it will be healed, but it still makes it a risky build. So there we have it, that is the risky Anti-Alatreon build I recommend for the longsword. But of course, every build out there has pros and cons. The 3 pros for this build include its high elemental damage, able to bring down and power down Alatreon quite quickly. It also has quite a few quality of life skills thanks to blight resistance, health boost, quick sheath and more. And finally, of course, it comes with the true Dragon Vein Awakening buffs, greatly improving our overall DPS. But of course there are cons. The biggest con is the true Dragon Vein Awakening health drain, meaning that if you're not careful and you take a hit before the health recovery portion of the true Dragon Vein Awakening has kicked in, it can leave you vulnerable and potentially one-shot you. And the final con, which doesn't really apply to this weapon per se, but it does apply to other Kiar weapons, which is there is sharpness issues, which means you're going to have to sharpen your weapon mid-fight during prolonged encounters. But regardless, this is one of the quickest builds that I've used to take down Alatreon, and I personally find it quite fun to use. Which brings us on to the next build, which is the safe longsword build. This is another high elemental DPS longsword build, but eliminates some of the risky aspects found on the previous build. This build also demonstrates how you don't have to take Kiar weapons to defeat Alatreon. So for this you'll need the Golden Headdress beta, the Silver Soul Mail beta, Silver Soul Braces beta, Silver Soul Coil beta and the Silver Soul Grease beta. I'm also using a Frost Charm 5, and for my weapon I'm using the Apsara Glacier, which is the Legiana longsword. This has an affinity increase augmentation and then an elemental up augmentation. As for the specialist tools, these are down to personal preference. So when it comes to the jaws, you don't have as many to play around with. So first of all, I've gone for a Frost Jaw to max out the Ice Attack skill. I've then gone for Vitality Jaws for some health boost, Resistor Jaws for blight resistance, Expert Jaws for some critical eye, a Tenderizer Jaw to max out weakness exploit, a Sharp Jaw for protective polish, and then I had some jaws to play around with, so I've gone for Handicraft Jaws for some extra sharpness, and for the jaws on the mantles, again I've gone for Destroyer Protection Jaws and some more Expert Jaws. So if you've done what I've done here, you should have a build with 150 health, 100 stamina, which will be 200 health and 150 stamina. When you're on a hunt and taking all your relevant consumables, you have an attack of 842 with a tiny bit of purple sharpness. You have 35% base affinity, which can be 85% when you're on a hunt and you're attacking monster weak points that have been tenderized through clutch claw attacks first. It would have been nice to get this higher, and if we didn't need blight resistance, this probably would be 100%. But anyway, you have an ice rating of 820. With a decent defense of 1041 that is strong against dragon and fire, but unfortunately weak to the other elements. So as for the skills, you have Ice Attack at level 6. Of course, remember, if you wanted to swap the weapon and charm, you would replace Ice Attack to match whatever new element you were using. You have Slinger Capacity level 5, which is a byproduct of the armor we're wearing, but allows us to carry more slinger ammunition into a hunt. You have Critical Eye level 4, which can be level 6 when we're wearing our mantles. You have Health Boost level 3, Blight Resistance level 3, Critical Boost level 3, Weakness Exploit level 3. Weakness Exploit is a skill that increases our affinity, so long as we're attacking monster weak points. And should these weak points be tenderized through clutch claw attacks first, this increase to our affinity is even greater. Weakness Exploit at level 3 can provide us a bonus 50% affinity. Anyway, you have Handicraft level 2, increasing the sharpness of the weapon we're using. We needed Handicraft in order to get to purple sharpness, which will ultimately allow us to deal more elemental damage. You have Windproof level 1, which is a byproduct of the armor we're wearing, which helps us resist minor wind effects, but it's kind of completely wasted on Alatreon in all honesty. You have Protective Polish level 1, and finally when you're wearing your mantles, you have Partbreaker level 2 and Divine Blessing level 2. As for the set bonuses, you have 2 of them, both attached to the Silver Rathalos Essence. First of all, for wearing 2 pieces of the armor, you'll have the Slinger Ammo Secret, allowing us to get the Slinger Capacity skill up from level 3 to a maximum of level 5. And finally, for wearing 4 pieces, you'll get True Critical Element, greatly increasing the elemental damage of our attacks when we crit a monster. So whilst this build may not have as high an elemental rating as the risky build, thanks to True Critical Element, it allows us to power down Alatreon quite often and almost keep up. So there we have it, that is the safe anti-Alatreon build I'd recommend for the longsword. But of course even this has pros and cons. Biggest pro, again, is its high elemental damage. Thanks to True Critical Element, we're able to power down the monster quite quickly. On top of that, it's an easy build to craft, not requiring Kiar weapons, Sapphire armor, or anything like that. So it's easier for new hunters to craft, and on top of this build can pretty much get away with using any elemental longsword in the game, so long as the longsword in question has a high elemental rating. But unfortunately there are cons. One of its biggest cons is it only has a small amount of purple sharpness, and whilst this is alleviated slightly with Protective Polish, it's still an issue. And then finally is this build does rely on wounding and tenderizing monster body parts, so you can get the high affinity and thus trigger the true critical element bonus more often. But regardless, this is a build that is still perfectly capable of taking on Alatreon, and of course it doesn't come with that risky health drain found on the Safi'jiiva build. So if you're looking for something different, or you don't have access to QR weapons, this is one I'd recommend. So there we have it, those are 2 builds I can recommend for taking on Alatreon with the longsword. Now of course, as you farm more and more, you will get Alatreon gear and weaponry, which will allow you to take on the hunt a little bit more easily, as these weapons have high elemental ratings and resistances. But until then, these builds will work just fine. So until next time, I've been Darcblade, bringing you Anti-Alatreon builds for the longsword in Monster Hunter World Iceborne. Hope you enjoyed the video, thanks for watching, subscribe and like for more.